Live from the broken down, low rent, sleazy, double greasy pirate radio Nut Hut Studios, it's time for the very first ever Southern.
CPR street gang, this is all fighting. Standing by, over. CPR street gang, this is all fighting. Standing by, over.
Right now, it's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines,
clock's run out. Time's up.
Wind is blowing cold and dark. On the road and no way out. Broken hearts, a smoking gun. On the run. On the run.
Skynet defense system
We're in.
now activated.
Past the firewalls, local defense nets, Minutemen, and subs.
Skynet fully operational, processing at 60 teraflops per second.
Sir, it should take less than a minute to find the virus and kill it.
All access inquiries to your supervisor.
Let's pray to God this works.
Skynet defense system now activated.
Power failure?
No.
What is it?
Tony, what the hell is going on?
Daddy!
Kay, what are you doing here?
My name's Jimmy. Skynet is online. It's Wednesday night. We have a very special guest tonight, Mr. L.B. Bork. We're going to be talking about the law, man. Stick around, Clyde Lewis listeners. Into the microcosm is on the air. Epic Journeyman, I dropped my mouse. Are you there?
I am here.
Excellent. Watch out for that brother with that big long board. Whoa! Is that a Tongan? I don't know.
You made it a long way.
I know. Nah.
Did you see the wreckage?
Tsunami all the way over.
I don't know. Did you see the wreckage, man?
I did.
Remember that Graham Parker song, Crawling from the Wreckage?
I don't think I do.
That's a good song. Maybe I'll whip it up later. There we are, ladies and gentlemen. It's into the microcosm. There's Epic Journeyman over there on the islands. He's still sitting there in one piece, believe it or not. You never know. I mean, I thought the volcano was going to blow just because all the volcanoes have been going off, and somehow you remain unscathed, and you still have your house on the big island.
I think that the last one got pretty close, though.
I'm hearing this. Do you hear that? Sounds like somebody's jingling change in their pocket. Do you hear that noise? I wonder what that is. I don't know. Maybe it's our new 5G. It's interfering with our signal. We're trying to go out long. Trying to go out hard here. Aftermath FM, Monday through Friday, 10:30 Pacific, immediately following the #1 broadcaster, Clyde Lewis. So it sounds like I'm echoing back somehow. Let me tone down my role here. So Epic Journeyman tonight, we have a very special guest, and I'm happy to bring him to the table here tonight for the audience and for the listeners at Aftermath FM and across the internet, wherever you may be listening. Because there's such a distinct difference between what the alternative media looks like now and what it looked like in the past. Back in the day, there was actual political activism that went on. There were people that were immensely they put themselves in a position to put forward the laws and the contract that we have with the federal government, with the country that we live in. In other words, they've got a document there called the Constitution, and that is the contract under which we follow the rules and obey what the state says. And so there's been a million ways to Sunday that they've broken that contract with the people. And L.B. Bork was one of the original people out here in the alternative media, and he was doing intense work trying to get the word out about the system, how to potentially exit that system, and really trying to show people exactly what we're living on. I mean, today there's so much information, Epic Journeyman, that's tossed in with the serious information. So it's really, for someone just coming on board, trying to sort through all the information that's on the internet, trying to find a piece of information that's not tainted by Bigfoot or, purple people eaters or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Because when you remember back to the alternative media in the beginning of the Alex Jones show, before he started being a regular visitor to Coast AM and all this, he used to would never talk about anything related. I don't talk about space aliens. I don't talk about space aliens here, ladies and gentlemen. You know what I mean? It was like that. But, slowly but surely over the years, somehow, the Coast to Coast format made it on to the Alex Jones show, subsequently, clouding the well, so to speak. And the Q Patriot operation that happened did a lot to that same end, Epic Journeyman. So there's been a clouding of the well, poisoning of the well, as it were. So it's almost impossible at this point for people to really discern what's going on without doing an immense amount of their own research. And who has time for that, man? You got to pick up the kids, you got to take grandma to the doctors. The dog needs to go out, Epic Journeyman.
You don't got time for blue chickens.
Right? Exactly. Well, that's all you do have time for is blue chickens, because you can't wrap your head around what it's going to take responsibility for the situation and then do what you have to do politically to change that system. So our guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, he wrote a book, and it's called The Red Amendment. If you want to take a look for it, L.B. Bork, The Red Amendment. It's got a website called packinlaw. What is it, LB?
US.
.us. So packinlaw.us. Welcome into the microcosm, LB Bork. Thanks for joining us, man. I appreciate you being here.
Likewise, thank you. Excellent.
Yeah.
Introduction. I mean, you're right about what you said. Totally on point.
Well,
it's been commandeered. The movement's been commandeered.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book, so people can get a feel for where we're going to be going tonight. So, you wrote your book. Tell everybody exactly what if you could just give us a nutshell, like the nutshell of the book, so people can get an idea about it. LB.
Yeah, a little bit about me. I started in the movement about 1993. Mm-hmm. And I listened to people back then, just like everyone does. I made the same mistakes, and they had some of it right, but some of it didn't sound right. So I did my own research and stopped listening to people about 1996, and started doing my own research and found out where the problems were, and started People's Awareness Coalition in 1998, wrote the book in 1999. And speaking of Alex Jones, I think the Pack and Law website went up about the same time his website did. Mm-hmm. So we've been around as long as Jones has, but he's degraded, as you noted.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the book, the Red Amendment, has to do with the 14th Amendment. And a lot of people think Russia was the first communist country, but it was really America.
Well, that's
and the Red Amendment refers to the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Expound on that. What do you mean by that exactly?
Basically, red means, negative in bookkeeping. So one of the references is to, negative bookkeeping balance, which is perpetual debt that the United States has basically been into for 200 years, but it made sure that people stayed in debt so they could get taxed more and enslaved, as you kind of noted earlier. But red is a reference to socialism and communism. Mm-hmm. That's the color. And of course, it goes back to the Rothschilds' Red Shield, and similar things in the Bible. Red means corruption and other things. Mm-hmm. So it references that basically.
Well, there's plenty of corruption to go around. I mean, it seems like it's almost like rats or cockroaches.
Right.
You can get rid of the ones you can see, but it's the ones you don't see that are the ones that are there after the 4-year term is up for whoever's president. So there's a whole infrastructure that's been built with these people that are in lifelong positions, administrative paper pushers inside the government, that continue to work for whoever it was they were working for, regardless of who the president is.
Right. One thing I've been saying lately, and I've known for years, but President Grant, the first president after the Civil War, his 2 terms in office, he was in there 8 years, were filled with graft and corruption. That's a fact. You can look that up and read about it. Mm-hmm. My position is it never ended.
No, it didn't. And the thing is that the other thing is we were talking about last night, and I hope you can come in and explain some of this and why it's so, is that they didn't free the slaves, that they made everyone slaves to the civil law system that we find ourselves in here now. And I think everybody is clear that we are slaves. The only thing that's free about us right here in America is we get to choose which slave job we're going to have.
Right.
And depending on how much money we have, then we can go to the right school, and we can maybe perpetuate ourselves into a house manager position, where in our $500,000 McMansions, where we look over the lowly slaves, the field hands, or as it was. But so
I think 80% of the population is living hand to mouth, if I know the stats correctly.
Mm-hmm. Well,
there's only about 2% of the people that can live indefinitely without having an income, for lack of better words. But other people, there's like 10, 15% that might have a couple $1,000s sitting around to carry them on for a month or two. But other than that, everyone's hand to mouth. That's no way to live.
No, and I think, you know, we're finding ourselves. The other thing that I brought up last night on the show was that when the wall came down, just like when the slaves were freed, you know, everyone was made a slave, and when the wall came down, it wasn't that communists had been defeated, but that communists had been released from behind the wall, and allowed to roam freely, and found its way over to China. Obviously, they've always been a communist country, but now they are more a communist capitalist model. And so really communism hadn't been defeated. It just been retooled and reloaded over there with a bunch of money from American corporations that want to avoid the taxation and the industrial waste requirements that in order to manufacture here in the United States of America. So everybody was willing to go and invest in China and invest in the new communism, where you get to make money as a worker. Everybody doesn't get the same thing. It almost seems like you're free, sort of like America. I mean, we're sitting on the outside looking at it, and we're saying to ourselves, well, it's the Chinese model. That's what Maurice Strong talked about. They've said they want the Chinese model to come here to the United States of America, but I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is maybe communism has been around in America a little bit longer than people can think about, eh?
Yep. The Republican Party actually is the actual original Communist Party. I refer to them as that.
Interesting. Well, expand on that.
Well, we have to go to where the Communist Manifesto came from. Of course, France went into rebellion about the late 1700s, and they had their so-called revolution. That word didn't exist until the French Revolution came about. Anytime you hear the word revolution, the rich are getting richer.
Yeah.
So it took them. My position is, based on my research, is the Communist Manifesto was basically a way to make the rich richer and consolidate the profits from the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. And, create workers for the rich people, which we see today, and you kind of just explained with the corporations going over to China and such. But Marx said a long time ago, 1848 was when the Communist Manifesto was written. It took them about 50, 60 years to get their act together, so to speak, and get that all together. But he said the working men have no country. So that tells us they're going to move people around to get jobs. So the Communist Manifesto did two things. It was meant to create a workforce and destroy the middle class. While all these people and scholars that have been told to read the Communist Manifesto, this is the first thing I saw when I read it. I go, wait, the elite aren't the bad guys. The middle class is. So what they've done is pit the middle class against the lower class and vice versa. Mm-hmm. And that's what we see with the Republicans and Democrats. And it's all about industry. If you go into the Rothschilds family crest or shield, it talks about industry. And if you don't have industry, you have no profits.
Yeah, I mean...
So that's it in a nutshell. The Communist Manifesto is basically a declaration of war on all countries of the world and their economies.
And the middle class.
They took over the economies.
When you have a healthy, thriving middle class, you start having a part of the population that's paying attention to the news. They're interested in things other than putting their nose to the grindstone. And so when you start to see that middle class rise up, you're starting to see something that the powers that be don't like. Because as long as you're going hand to mouth, you don't have time to take a look at anything that's going on. And so they get to continue on and move up and down the chain And these different perpetrators go into office and, sit there for years and years and years on end. There's many things we can do to change what's going on, but I want to circle back around to talk about so to talk about why civil rights makes us slaves, and what we really should be concerned about is natural rights.
Correct.
So would you mind breaking that down a little bit for people, because I think that there's a big distinction that needs to be made between the two, because I think people don't understand that the Constitution doesn't give you your rights. It guarantees your God-given rights, which are your natural rights. Would you mind expanding on that for us, please?
Well, civil rights are something that the legislature conjures up based on what they think is right or wrong. And it applies to people under private law. And that's what most people don't understand what's happened. You said we're under civil law, but there was civil law even before the 14th Amendment. What they've done is pull people into Congress and allowed them to be controlled by their civil law. And that's parcel of communism, is to centralize control. So what they did is destroy the states' rights and the custom and usage law under God. A lot of people in America, the first 13 colonies, practiced biblical law. It was William Penn that said, "Those not governed by God will be ruled by tyrants." And he was under the king at the time when that trial came about.
Mm-hmm.
But the king was imposing laws that were unjust, and the jury at the time found him not guilty. So that's where he came up with that quote, because they said, well, this is ungodly what the king's imposing, and it's not our custom and usage, so we find Penn not guilty. That's just one example of kind of how it works. And I was watching a movie, you probably heard of it or saw it, was it Larry Flint, the porn peddler?
Mm-hmm.
Smut guy.
Mm-hmm.
That movie, I'll give you an example of how they flipped the system over. He was in Ohio, and he was taken to task by the legislature. The jury found him guilty of peddling smut, and they said, we don't agree with this, it's over, you can't do it anymore. Well, the way the old system or the common law system is supposed to work, or custom usage, is the jury has the final say about the law and the outcome of the case. Of course, that was under the 14th Amendment, so they appealed it to the Supreme Court, which wouldn't have happened prior to the 14th Amendment. And they overturned the jury's decision. So that breached the custom and usage law of the state of Ohio, which allowed him to do whatever he wanted based on the Luciferian system that's been in place. It's been in place since day one, but it expanded under the 14th Amendment. So it killed, the common law of the state. And that happens. And that's what they've done. And it's just gotten worse over the years. It's getting worse every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, one of the biggest things in the last couple of years, has been problems with the so-called election system, and there's a bunch of.
It's a crime to vote, by the way.
I know, and let's get into that when we come back. We're coming up on the top of the hour break.
Yeah.
When we come back, this LB Bork, the Red Amendment, packandlaw.us. Go over, check out his site, and definitely check out the book. Can you get that on Amazon, LB?
We're trying to get it up on Amazon in PDF. It should be up there by the end of the month. We're hoping.
All right, so do you have any place where people can get it now?
Yeah, you just go to the website. If you go to packandlaw.us, there's 9 websites associated with PAC, so you can check out the Red Amendment site and go there and order it.
Well, we got about 3 or 4 minutes left. Why don't you talk a little bit about PAC and Law and what your website's actually all about? Because you're trying to help people get educated in a lot of ways. Why don't you share a little bit about what the website's up to?
Yeah, I just did a redo on the whole web portal, is what we call it. The introduction to People's Awareness Coalition, or PACinlaw.us, is welcome to the People's Awareness Coalition, PAC in Law. We have centered on constitutional education and political awareness since 1998. In law means living under the true common law and not being subject to the legal system of the insurgents, rebels of Reconstruction. That's the 14th Amendment system. All good Americans need to know that the red faction keeps you at the door of law. They keep you outside in the red vortex, so you remain in servitude to their whims as human capital. And that's what they did. We hopefully some of the listeners know about what this Klaus, was it Schwab? But what's his name?
Klaus Schwab.
Yeah, Klaus Schwab.
The World Economic Forum.
He recently said, "You own nothing and be happy." That's communism.
That is communism. Epic Journey.
And he's a capitalist. Getting back to what you were bringing up before about things moving around and whatever. The communists are the capitalists, and the capitalists are the communists.
Well, I know
it's all the same program.
Epic Journeyman, jump in here, man. So, you got any questions, or you want to? I see you met Larry Flint. I saw you were saying in the chat room.
Yeah. I was putting that in the chat there. I mentioned it before on the show. I was playing nickel. I wasn't playing nickel Keno. I was playing quarter Keno at the Rio Hotel, and Larry Flint came and sat down next playing the nickel Keno machines like a bank, right, by himself. Starts talking, "Hey, how's it going there?" He has kind of funny voice, and I didn't know who he was at first. And I started looking at him like, I think I know that guy. Where did I see him before? And
it wasn't Woody Harrelson.
No, it was really him. But these two hot girls come and sit next to him, and he introduces himself. And while I'm talking to him, not looking what I'm doing, is dropping a quarter at a time on the machine, playing solid nines on the Keno machine, and I hit $2,500 on a single quarter. I was about to leave Vegas, man, and I won that and ended up putting a down payment on a truck.
Let me say
it's a memorable day for me.
Was Larry Flint in his wheelchair at that time? Or
yeah, was his wheelchair.
He was?
Yeah, so they had these combination machines. They were nickel machines. He was playing Keno on that. There's like four of them together. They're low profiles. Because, just he roll his wheelchair up there. And these girls came over, sat next to him, grabbed him by the shoulder and stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing looking women, actually.
Sure
why these hot girls hanging with this guy in the wheelchair,
It reminds me of that movie Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, and the Christopher Walken character and his nurses. They were super hot with short skirts. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back. It's Aftermath FM. Aftermath FM, the alternative to the alternative.
Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific. But what happens when you miss an episode? Aftermath.fm is the official free streaming network of Ground Zero, featuring some of the top voices in paranormal and parapolitical radio and podcasts, such as The Leo Zagami Show, Into the Microcosm with Jimmy Jean, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable, The Kev Baker Show, The Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray Valentine, and much, much more. What are you waiting for? Head on over to aftermath.fm right now and get complete on-demand access to the Ground Zero archives, as well as the works of a dozen other hosts. Sign up right now and get complete access to our study groups, videos, and document archives, and connect with other listeners on our private social media network. Aftermath.fm, home of quality counterculture talk radio. Aftermath.fm.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
After about a month of Extendovite, I don't know what it is about the circulation factor, I was able to increase the weight, increase the amount of sets I could do. It has to do with the oxygen getting to the blood. You should market this as an athletic performance. And I don't change anything about my diet or anything. I just thought, this is amazing. Bilberry extract is got something called resveratrol in it, which is the same stuff that you get from red wine. It's also good for eyesight. And I was reading that the Royal Air Force during World War II would give their pilots bilberry jam so they could have better night vision stuff. This is amazing.
To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822. Or visit our website at heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
It's Aftermath FM, 10:30 Pacific, Monday through Friday. You'll find us immediately following Clyde Lewis and Ground Zero team.
My sleep at night, making myself crazy. Out of my mind, out of my mind. Wrote it down and read it out, hoping it would save me. Too many times, my love, he makes it feel like nobody else, nobody else. But my love, he doesn't love me, so I tell myself, one, don't pick up the phone, you know he's only calling cause he's drunk and alone. Two, don't let him in, you have to kick him out again. Three, don't be his friend, you know you're gonna wake up in his bed in the morning. And if you're under him, you ain't getting over him. I got no rules, I count them.
Epic Journeyman. Hola.
Hi there.
Excellent. Well, come on in here, man. I've been giving you a break for the last 30 minutes, and I know you've been sitting there. You got questions and you got things you want to bring to the table. Now, one of the things you brought up before the show was the representatives. Did you want to get into some of that with our guest LB Bork? The Red Amendment. You can find that at packinlaw.us if you're interested in getting over there and checking it out. Epic Journeyman, come on in here and get in here with LB Bork.
There's a couple things with the Constitution and the amendments that I'm interested in. One of them is the First Amendment, the original First Amendment that never got approved, was about representatives being 1 per 40,000 for Congress. It was actually a little less before when it started, right? Like 30,000. They upped it to 40,000 and settled on that. And it's just never, all these years since it was originally brought up in 1789 or whenever it was, been approved. And it just makes such a difference. If Congress had that many representatives who represented at that level, there'd be no such thing as gerrymandering and, all these people having this undue power that they have right now because the Founding Fathers never intended it to be this way.
Yeah, back to freedom of speech is they twisted that around. Originally, the First Amendment was to allow the press not to get hammered by the government for talking out against the government. And they've turned it around, like the Larry Flint case, for example, of people's free speech, which the intent of the First Amendment was never about that. So that's some of the perversion that's happened under the 14th Amendment system. And with that, I didn't mean to interrupt anything you had, but in line with something that happened today and has been going on a while. I don't know if you've heard of Yuri Bezmenov.
We were just talking about him last night. Yeah.
Yuri.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he's a quite a frequent visitor on Into the Microcosm over the past I don't know, 7 years or so.
I always mess up his name. We've been talking about him for years, and every time Yuri,
what's his name? That Brezhnev guy.
He's
Yeah.
He's supposedly a defector from Russia, but you know, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter if he's a good guy or bad guy. He spoke the truth in regard to the 4 steps of takeover, which they're doing. They've been doing. Our friend John. Let me backtrack here. John Breeson has talked about the Fabian socialism, and that's not what I measure. Socialism by. I measure communism by is what's in the Communist Manifesto. You know, I have a joke that, for example, Homer Simpson says, the government didn't say we're communists, so we're not. You know, well, it doesn't matter what they say. You have to watch what they do. You know, don't listen to what they say. Just because they say we're not communists doesn't mean it's true, is what I'm getting at.
No.
But all the planks of the Communist Manifesto are applied in America. So that means we're communist. But back to... Yeah, go ahead.
We were the original target. You know, it wasn't Russia at the time. If not for Smedley Butler, we would be the first communist country originally. I mean, that takeover, you know, was intended to oust Roosevelt and start it here. That's what it was kind of appeared. That was already done. One of the last things in the Communist Manifesto is it's done by war. The Civil War was how they installed it. And what I'm saying about what John has brought to light is the socialism part of it has been done slowly. It took them about 100 years to get all the planks instituted, but they did that. The Department of Education was visited back then. Matter of fact, Lincoln instituted the Department of Agriculture, which is the sickle of communism, in 1862, I believe it was. And the Department of Education was visited, but they really didn't get it instituted in its full effect till about the 1960s. So this is the Fabian socialist part of them slowly implementing. Like, for example, this central bank wasn't instituted until 1913 under the Federal Reserve Act. So my book's about the Civil War being the foundation for the start of it. And it was starting way before that. If you go back and look at some of the state constitutions and what happened, it happened right around the same time the Communist Manifesto was released. And there was some criminal actions against Marx and some other people over in Europe. They were held for sedition against the states, and they came over here as the 1848ers. And they landed, a lot of them landed in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is actually the first communist state, in my estimation. New York is bad, but a lot of these 48ers came and settled in Wisconsin.
So it's interesting and important to make a distinction about what the Civil War was really about, because most Americans would say, if you asked what the Civil War was about, I would say I'm gonna be conservative, and I'm gonna say 7 out of 10 people would say the Civil War was about slavery.
Well, that's the narrative,
right? But Northern liberals were coming in and wanted to get their taxation out of these hides. There was too much money being made, and they needed their money, and so a lot of it had to do with taxation, did it not?
A lot of it, yes. Speaking of the North and South, the North was hell-bent on industry, and the South is more agriculture. And supposedly, I haven't researched, there's a guy named Mike Gaddy that might know better about the debt of the South was all paid off by the Civil War, you know, by that time. The Revolutionary War debt, okay? So because industry, I had my own business, and industry takes capital. You know, you have machines and all these things you have to buy to create the industry to do things, and agriculture is kind of natural, you know. You plant crops, and that's about it. Of course, machineries today, based on the Industrial Revolution, has caused debt of farmers and the agriculture industry, but it all goes hand in hand.
Well, let me circle back around to your John Brisson and the Fabian Socialist, because the important aspect of the Fabian Socialist is to understand their role in the pop culture revelation of the method. These are all of the writers that people are familiar with. All of these people, a lot of the names and books and information that's been given out over the years, most of those people were published strictly because they were with the program. So this is the soft pimp hand of the Fabian Socialist. You can't come in with a hard pimp stick, okay? You have to come in soft. And so they utilized the pop culture promotion, whether it had been book, magazine, radio, movies, whatever it is, you're going to find these Fabian Socialists are everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. Right. And so the thing is one of the things, these are called active measures, is one of the things that Yuri Brezhnev brought to the table. Active measures, which is subversion is one of them, and the infiltration of the education system by installing, let's just call them socialists, by installing socialist-friendly educators, and have your universities and your schools and everybody, your school system is union teachers. Most of the time, these unions will go in a liberal direction from a voting perspective. You're going to see a wider dynamic of demographic in these unions. And you're going to see a specific leaning. Now, it's interesting you brought up the Industrial Revolution because I don't think people realize that during the Industrial Revolution, people still had slaves. And they sent them off to the cities to work. They said, listen, you can go be free, but you have to send me back 50% of whatever you make. And so slaves went to the cities, and the only places they can go live on that kind of money were these dilapidated buildings. And so these...
the other side of the tracks.
Yeah, so these ghettos of workers who couldn't afford to live in an upscale way developed. And so through the whole United States system that we see here, all these years these liberals have been pilfering billions and at this point I would be willing to say trillions of dollars have been allocated to help these areas come out of their poverty, and those areas are still in the exact same poverty they've always been in.
It's all in Michael Moore's house.
Yeah. So the thing is, we're still getting taxed 50%. We're on. I mean, this is the company store model developed after the Great Depression, where you could go pick the fruit and live in the little house that they provide you and buy your groceries on credit at the store. This is what you were saying earlier, which is you're in the red, constantly in debt. If you're constantly in debt, you are a slave on a rat wheel going to a job you hate all your life until you get to retire.
Exactly. This is all planned. Anyway, back to Brezhnev. He had 4 steps that took place: demoralization, destabilization, crisis, and normalization. Joe Biden said today, you've heard probably him say, the new normal. It's that right there. So the COVID virus is causing the crisis, the main crisis right now.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, all the planks of the Communist Manifesto have been applied in America for 50 years. They took us off the gold standard in 71. And the last 50 years has just been it's a false reality. Everything's been debt. and now we're going into hyperinflation. So that's part of the crisis also. So they caused this crisis so they could do the final stages for their Great Reset. And I made mention in my book about the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it's only great for the bankers and the elite. That's who it's great for. So the same thing's going to happen on a worldwide basis with this Great Reset.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be just another nightmare.
And
I've said, too, that if it wasn't for credit, we'd be worse off now than we were during the Depression. People were selling their children during the Depression.
Well, I think the Depression's on its way here because, I mean, there's something coming that just changed the year here. Coming into this new year, there's something called Basel III, where countries have to divulge their derivative exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of reasons why many people don't want that to happen. And the thing is to get rid of all that derivative in some sort of a crash, and then to come back with the new digital existence. Now, stepping into the smart cities with your, COVID pass type ID, this type of thing. That seems to be, the on the table
mm-hmm.
in the near term future. But
of course it is, right?
But I mean, in the meantime, though, there's a whole couple generations of people that have been softened. The heads,
true.
The soft heads of Americans have been penetrated. Just like when Yuri Brezhnev says, Stalin said, when the tanks roll into Poland, the situation will be normalized.
Right.
And so, the situation is trying to be normalized here. They're trying to institute this. Do we even have? Let me ask you a question, Epic Journeyman and LB Bork. Do we even have a constitution? I mean, if you look at the ACLU website and you look at the constitutional free zones, and you see 100 miles in from every border and every coastline, and you see a 50-mile ring drawn around international airports where the Constitution of the United States is not the law. It does not apply. It's the UCC code. And when you look at that and you see the majority of people living by the coast, how many people are even living in a constitutional zone at this point?
No one is. That's what my book's about. They usurped the Constitution with the 14th Amendment.
All right, well, let's drop the hammer, man. Tell me about it. Tell me how it happened, man. Tell me how the 14th Amendment did that.
Well, you were talking about it enslaved everyone. I think that's just a common narrative that people have heard, but literally it's correct. The 13th Amendment said there will be no voluntary servitude. But then the 14th Amendment turns around and enslaves everyone. And how they did it is the Civil War was unlawful. The United States or Lincoln, whoever, he did some things right because they killed him. It had to do with the greenbacks, I believe. It was in competition with the bankers' system they wanted to put in place. But anyway, the 14th Amendment, they usurped or basically overthrew the southern states, but they still had to take care of the northern states. So what they did is they kept up with the Reconstruction acts, and they called the Southerners rebels, but the Supreme Court or the courts determined later that that was a lie. It's that narrative that they pushed, and they still push it today, same as the narrative of freeing the slaves, like you mentioned, Jimmy. And that's bullshit too. Everything's just a lie. People have heard that the victor writes the history, right? And that's exactly what's happened. Mm-hmm. But how they usurped the northern states is they use similar language to the Reconstruction Acts, but it's different. In the 14th Amendment, Section 2, it actually says it's a crime to vote. And the language is, the right to vote is denied except for participation in rebellion or other crime. So they turn people into voting's a crime based on it's got a duality. You can't vote in this new system if you have a felony. Everyone knows that, right? You're a prisoner. You can't vote.
Right.
That's part of the other crime. But you can't vote also on the side of the usurpation is unless you participate in rebellion. And if you look at Plank 4 of the Communist Manifesto, they take property from rebels. So this set up the stage for the new law system where they could go in and take your property through an IRS agency action or other action without going through a proper court proceeding. So they're taking money away, or properties away from the rebels, which are the voters and the people that are aligned with them. It's like, okay, you didn't rob the bank, vote, but you're driving the car.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're part of that citizenship that Section 1 of the 14th Amendment creates. So everyone's deemed a criminal and enslaved by that because they don't say anything and they participate in this system. So this is so evil. If everyone knew about this, we could fight everything that's happened the last 150 years.
I know, that's why I wanted to have you on, because you're one of the few people that actually wrote a book that shows people and tells people about what they can do to help themselves, no?
Right.
But
people don't. What they've done with me is put out disinformation to cover up what I wrote about 20 years ago.
Epic Journeyman, jump in here. I heard you wanted to jump in.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because the thing that the loophole you're describing in the 13th Amendment is that, slavery is abolished in voluntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime.
Right.
So if you're in prison or you've been sentenced to whatever, then obviously people think of it that way, but it depends on what you define a crime as. So if you're being punished for committing a crime, whatever that crime is, you are therefore allowed to be a slave or in a state of involuntary servitude.
Correct.
So changing any kind of the smallest law that you can break and be punished for, right, is a loophole that can make you a slave legally a slave.
Right. And if you read enough case law, they refer to prisoners as slaves. That's how they make them do their license plates and whatever cheap labor they get out of the prisons. What was that movie that dealt with that?
I don't
There's
know.
a movie from the 60s that dealt with that. Now, I'm not thinking of the one
Cool
with,
Hand Luke?
it might have been, yeah. The prison warden was caught
I know what you're talking about.
mistreating prisoners.
Well, he was selling them out as labor out into the community is what he was doing.
Right.
So he was.
But they are slaves. But he was doing it for personal gain.
Yeah. Well,
the prisoners are property of the state.
That's right.
Instead, so yeah.
So there is a way to exit the system, and I know lots of people get in trouble because they hear something that's called a sovereign citizen, and they hear about it, and then they go wild, and they take their plates off their car, and when they get pulled over, they start telling people they're traveling, they're not engaged in commerce, and all that. People get in trouble, but there is a way out, and if you'd like to, you can talk about that when we come back from the break in a couple minutes here.
Sure.
So, Epic Journeyman, jump back in here now, because I know you wanted to jump in. I heard you there. So, and then we'll go to the break here. It's in the Microcosm Aftermath FM. Go ahead, Epic Journeyman.
Well, I want to stay a little bit with that idea of the involuntary servitude. The world gets stuck in it. Anytime you technically don't pay your bill, right, you're committing a crime, right? So once you get in debt and you miss a couple payments, there's
only
things out there.
There's civil law and criminal law, though.
Right.
Only slaves vote is what he's saying. He's saying to vote is a crime. So only slaves are voting. Every time you vote, you're committing a crime, and when you commit that crime, you're thereby enslaving yourself.
They set people up with this clause in the 14th Amendment. It's a setup, and it's totally unconscionable.
So how does that apply to corporations that are running the private prisons now. So it's
that's the 14th Amendment. Justice Black said, I think it was so many years after the 14th Amendment was instituted, there was just a fraction of a percent of cases that came to the Supreme Court to protect blacks' rights. Most of them were to protect corporations' rights under the Section 1 person language. So again, they tell you this lie in the story to cover up what's really happening. And like I said, communism and capitalism are the same beast. One feeds the other.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. The Red Amendment, L.B. Bork. When we come back, maybe he's going to share a little bit of what. Now, let me ask you this question, and if you don't mind, have you exited the system based on your research?
Oh yeah. It's called correction of nationality, is what I call it, and there's laws to provide for it.
Badass.
All they keep people in the system by disinformation and fear.
Let me ask you now. I've heard a conspiracy theory, and I've never asked anybody who potentially might know. So let me ask you. When a person is born, I've heard rumor that there's a document that the parent is supposed to sign within a certain period of time, and if they don't sign it, that you become property of the state. Have you heard this? And is it?
I haven't heard that. The birth certificate, which people say is a bad thing, but the only reason it's a bad thing is because it's issued by the de facto state. But otherwise, it's a good thing because it shows your birth right to the country that you're born in, which would be each of the states.
Interesting. Okay, listen. It's in the microcosm. It's L.B. Bork, the Red Amendment. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Stick around. Maybe there's a way out. It's the after party, the underground. It's not your granddaddy's late night. It's Aftermath FM. My name's Jimmy. It's in the microcosm.
With Clyde Lewis, live Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific. But what happens when you miss an episode? Aftermath.fm is the official free streaming network of Ground Zero, featuring some of the top voices in paranormal and parapolitical radio and podcasts, such as The Leo Zagami Show, Into the Microcosm with Jimmy Jean, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable, The Kev Baker Show, The Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray Valentine, and much, much more. What are you waiting for? Head on over to Aftermath.fm right now and get complete on-demand access to the Ground Zero archives, as well as the works of a dozen other hosts. Sign up right now and get complete access to our study groups, videos and document archives, and connect with other listeners on our private social media network. Aftermath.fm, home of quality counterculture talk radio. Aftermath.fm.
Don't regret growing old. It's a privilege denied to many. Heart disease is taking our youth from us. Young people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond are dying needlessly. One of the hardest messages I've ever had to deliver is to convince people that something natural like Extendivite should be taken as a preventative measure. I'm sure you heard an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Extendivite is that ounce. Take Extendivite for 1 year and see what your doctor has to say and how much better you feel. Herbs take time to address the problem. It took years of life to have a problem. Give Extendivite 1 year to fix the problem. Don't wait until it's too late. Call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or visit us on Amazon.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Monday through Friday, 10:30 Pacific, right here. I might not be Mr. Right, but I'm definitely Mr. Right now. Aftermath FM in stereo.
I went home with the waitress the way I always do. How was I to know she was with the Russians too? I was gambling in Havana. I took a little risk. Send lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this. Ha!
Ha! Lawyers,
Great
guns.
tune.
Yeah, man. So, this subject matter here, the reason you don't hear a lot about it is because it doesn't sell storable food, and it doesn't make you buy vitamins, and it doesn't make you get, the thing about that is that you sit there and you hear it, and you get a barrage of this excitement, this dopamine rush that happens when you get the doom and gloom and the doom scrolling, when this is actually something that you can do for yourself to understand exactly where you stand, because there's a big difference between the definition of a word depending on which lexicon you're working off of. And if you're a lawyer or an attorney, and you're working off the Black's Law Dictionary, the definition of the very words that we take for granted, that we think are, they mean something, they don't mean anything to what we think they mean. Just like they say, read a contract with a magnifying glass. That's because when you look at your checkbook and you see that line down there, it ain't a line. It says something. So, I mean, if you didn't look at the line with a magnifying glass and I put that in there and that was a contract that you were signing, that one line that you signed on right there, you didn't realize it was a sentence. You know? You don't know what you just signed away. So go look at your checkbook next time with a magnifying glass down at the bottom there, see what that line says. Because it's a contract. That paper is a contract, just like that dollar bill, that Federal Reserve note, that's a contract too. Is it not?
Yeah, like you opened up with, the constitutions are a contract. All life is contract. That's what most people have to know. They should be taught this in school. They should know people should know how to contract. And they don't. And that's the reason they've, what's the word I like to use? Compartmentalize law into an industry and don't teach it in school. The only reason for that is so they can jerk people around.
Yeah, I mean, they used to teach people in school. They used to have a thing where they taught people how to cook. You know, they cook their own food. They used to have a thing in there in the wood shop. They taught you how to make stuff. They had an auto shop. They taught you how to fix your own car. They quit teaching you all that shit because they wanted you to go and fund the service industry that they were going to create. What's a service industry? Well, that's where you go around and you're everybody's slave. You know, hey, man, come and wash my car. Hey, man, come and clean my house. Hey, man, why don't you go over here and do my yard work? Hey, bro, why don't you flesh out there and get me something to eat? Hey, man, you know, we're slaves to slaves to slaves to slaves, and there's a pecking order to that slavery. You know, I call America the land of the free, home of the slave.
There you go.
You know what I mean? Because listen, I go to the ATM. I take my money out. It's not my bank's ATM, but it's on the same system. It doesn't have my bank's name on it. They charge me, $3 up to $3.50 to take my money out. Well, they're charging me $3.50 to print that $20 bill right there out of that machine, because that's pretty much what they're doing. They're just printing these notes. These are notes, okay? Someday the note comes due, doesn't it?
Yep.
Does the note come due? I think it does. Well, listen, everybody's on the edge of their seat. Is there a way out, LB? And if there is, can you bullet point it for us and just sort of let us know? And if we can find that information in your book, packandlaw.us is where you're going to find the link to get LB's book. Go ahead.
Back to the 14th Amendment itself, there's 4 different sections. Well, actually, there's 5. The 5th one says that Congress can force legislation to make it work. But like we've talked about, they've tricked people into participating, which in my opinion and belief is everything that's happened the last 150 years is void. So any debt that's accumulated is void, and it actually, in my reading of the 4th section of 14th Amendment, says it is void. But if no one contests it and keeps playing the game, playing in their sandbox, it stands. And I'm afraid with what's going on with this Great Reset that it's going to become you're not going to be able to do anything about it unless it happens very quickly. And that's why I get upset at people. The people that have read my book over the years, there's been thousands and thousands of people that have, found interest in PAC, but they're gone. They're hiding under their tables or whatever they're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
They're not helping.
See that website again. There's people asking in the chat. Sorry to interrupt you, but there's people been asking about your where your website is. They're looking for you. So you mentioned PAC something at the beginning of the show.
It's PAC PACinlaw.us. PACinlaw.us.
Yeah, if you put that in Google, we're even getting a good rating. DuckDuckGo shows a bunch of good stuff.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I've written tons of articles beside the book.
It's fantastic.
Some people say the articles are better, and they are in the sense that they're more detailed on different things like the term citizen. You finally got sick of people using liberty and freedom interchangeably. They're totally 2 different words. And liberty is a bad word, actually. It means civil. It refers to civil law. So that's another trick they've used to sucker people in. And that word's been used since, the founding of the United States under the Constitution, or, before then.
All right, so come back.
It's trickery.
Come back around over here. You're about to get into the 14th Amendment and you're going to bullet point out some of the high points of how it's possible for people to potentially exit the system.
What they did is create an act the day before the 14th Amendment was put on the books. And it wasn't done lawfully because the states didn't ratify it. And that makes another reason it's all voluntary, because it wasn't not only lawfully ratified because of the force on the southern states. That wasn't lawful. The United States had no authority to do what they did.
Mm-hmm.
It was not passed by all the states. So therefore, according to the contract, the Constitution, it doesn't exist. The only way it can exist is the people that are participating under it. So it's private law. But the day before they put the thing in place, they created a thing called People's Rights in the American States, or something like that. I can't, I don't know the exact words, but it had to do with expatriating, removing yourself from the body politic. And it's kind of covert, but the section said that the states can't deny you the right to get out of the system. So it is unlawful, but the whole point is they didn't act in good faith and let people know about it. For example, when you go down to register, they don't have a notice up there saying, oh, by the way, you're committing the crime of rebellion against the lawful constitutional state, and you're participating in an alternate state that's created under Article 4 of the Constitution, and we're going to make you a slave. They don't give you that notice. So that makes it deceptive and fraud. So that's why I'm saying everything that they've done is basically questionable and could be destroyed. I'm of the opinion any money that's been made, especially since 1971, should be taken away from these millionaires and given back to the states. Any, so-called, it represents debt, but they're getting rich off fruit from the poisonous tree.
Mm-hmm.
But unless people know this and protest it and say something about it, they're going to get away with it. All this crap that's going on. Biden today, every time his mouth open, he's lying.
Well, the other thing is that the information that you have to put forward and the way that you can be politically activated by the information is most of the alternative media had to start talking about Bigfoot and purple people eaters because they were getting thrown off of YouTube. The only safe space there is on the internet anymore is in the paranormal area, because then you can say whatever you want and you don't put yourself in a position that has any effect on the system. But
we had a YouTube channel and they stripped everything out of it.
Listen, on January 6th, I did a broadcast for 5 hours. And on that broadcast, I was on there, John Wayne was on there, a bunch of people from Rev Radio were on there. There was literally 6 people on the call. I had 8 cameras across Washington, D.C. I had the feed coming in. I had put that up on my screen, and we watched the whole thing and commented on it. And YouTube stripped it off my channel. Yeah. Because there was video of what actually happened. I had 8 different cameras across Washington, D.C. being piped in on one screen. I mean, there was things going on there that we saw, for example, when these dudes were about to scale up the side of the scaffolding, up the side of the building, there was this camera angle that was showing these line of dudes that were dressed in black, and they had these pads, like football pads, and but there was no insignia anywhere on these uniforms. Now, it's a law that if an officer is in a protest, they have to, because they used to beat the shit out of people with sticks in the 60s, they made them put their badge numbers on their helmets. They made them put their number on their uniform so that if you got your head crushed, somebody would know exactly who it was that did it. But these particular individuals did not have any insignia whatsoever on their uniforms. Right. And they were making these angry motions towards the crowd, but without actually engaging anybody. And to me, it looked almost like some sort of like a television show or something, because it just looked like it was fake, just like everything else we see. We just went through this whole operation with Trump in office, and then we went through the election results, and then all of a sudden everybody's all up in arms about elections. Like elections haven't been rigged since the beginning. So in other words...
No, they've done this to cover up my work, is what I believe. And the people that know my work believe the same thing. And this so-called insurrection that happened a year ago, they're trying to cover up the real insurrection, which is the 14th Amendment. It, as a matter of law, in fact, the 14th Amendment creates an insurrection and rebellion. And they say it right in Section 2. And Section 3 deals with These insurrectionists can't be in office unless they uphold the Constitution and its original premise. And they're not doing that now because they're so corrupt and brainwashed. It's gotten way out of hand. And they, like you said, Jimmy, what they do is put a bunch of crap out there to distract people. That's how they operate. And as far as you were talking about the FBI and these guys, they are allowed to lie and cheat and deceive people to entrap them. That's one of the first things I noted when I was in the law group down in Arizona back in the 90s, is there's actually statutes on the books that says police officers can lie in their line of duty, which is unconscionable.
It is, you know. We've done the Never Talk to the Police show here, and there's 2 sections. There's a section where there's an attorney telling you why, and then there's a second section where there's a law enforcement officer who has now decided he wanted to become a lawyer, and so he comes up before the class and he talks about what exactly goes on when they question people. And basically, what he says is he can do anything he wants to get you to talk. For example, what he does is he says, you know, I put a tape recorder on the desk in the room, and he goes, and I come in and I sit down and I turn off the tape recorder. Okay, and he says, this is what I say to my perpetrator. I say, listen. It's just me and you here. I'm going to turn off the tape recorder, and we're just going to talk, you and I, about, you know, he goes, man, look, you know, man to man, I understand, you know, she was a real good-looking girl. You know, I understand where you're coming from. And he gets this guy to talk. Meanwhile, this guy's thinking, you know, because of the presentation, he's thinking the tape recorder's off, but there's obviously microphones and cameras all over this interviewing room, and anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, ladies and gentlemen. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And let me just say this too: the reading of your rights doesn't then enforce them. No one has to tell you your rights for your rights to exist. Okay, reading the Miranda rights is something they have to do. Because that's what they have to do, but you still have the right to remain silent, whether they read you that right or not.
And the problem is, with this system, people plead the Fifth. If your status is proper, you would use the state constitution's equivalent to the Fifth Amendment, the right to remain silent. So all these things are tricks that, you know, it's called getting hung by the tongue. And people aren't properly trained, and that's one thing we're talking about, or I referenced in a lot of our literature the last couple of years, especially, is proper education. And there's a lot of disinformation out there. And I wrote a paper called Operatives and Opportunists. They are destroying us. Well, anyone out there, there's a bunch of people that have taken my work, and I believe most of them are operatives, but they've twisted the meaning around and to cover up the truth of what's in my book and paperwork or papers I've written. It's really sad that people aren't working together, and that's the biggest problem: unity.
It is, you know, and I say that is the one thing that will get you killed in the alternative media is to bring people together. You know, listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know what your rights are, you don't have any.
Right.
Period. So, do you want to take some calls? Because I'll open up the phones. We're coming up on the top of the hour. If you want to take a few calls, I'll open up the phones for people that have questions. Because I saw some people asking questions in the chat room into the microcosm of Jimmy Jean's Strike Zone. It's like 50 people over here. They were asking questions about the sovereign citizen movement, and I, you know, like I brought up earlier, there's aspects to that, and people go off on a tangent and get themselves in trouble.
Right. That's true. And I believe the sovereign citizen thing is disinformation, intentional planted disinformation.
I think you're 100% correct. Do you remember do you remember when there was a police film that had gotten out when Ron Paul was running for president, and they said one of the things that you could tell if someone was an extremist is if they had a Ron Paul sticker on the back of their car, or if they quoted the Constitution or said they were sovereign. That meant you were about to get a beating from that cop to make sure you didn't pull any fast moves.
I have a story in regard to that.
Go ahead.
I used to go out on Friday nights, and there was a cop in town here. I'm in a small town in Wisconsin. It's kind of funny. I wrote my book. I live in the town that a lot of lead was mined to kill the Civil War soldiers. And my book was written in this town. It's kind of like poetic justice, maybe. I didn't plan it that way. It just happened. But anyway, the cop in town here, I gave my book to. And that's kind of funny. He's one of these Christian people. And there's a story there, but I'm just going to go with the story he told my cousin and myself one night. During his break, he used to play guitar at the local bar I went to. But he told us about this seminar that the Southern Poverty Law Center put on, which is connected with the ADL, which is all bad. They're all bad people. They're part of the communist takeover. But he went to the seminar, and he and his, some of his sergeant, he was a sergeant, and some of his buddies said, they were telling us that anyone that, mentions the Constitution's a bad person, just like you said, Jimmy. And we said to ourselves, we took an oath to uphold it. What the hell's that about? So they smelled a rat.
Yeah.
With this presentation by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a positive thing.
I think that thing I was talking about was called the Niacc Report. The Niacc Report is what that thing was. And it was a training film for law enforcement officers at this particular time. That was an important moment in time for the alternative media, too, because the Ron Paul movement was the last time honestly, I think a lot of people got their heart broken when Ron Paul rolled over, man.
Yeah.
And, hey, I hate to say it, man. I hate to say it, but listen, ladies and gentlemen, an oath to a brotherhood, and that brotherhood means more than any other thing. It means more than a law in a country. And let me just say, when you talk about sovereign territory, the Masonic Lodge is a sovereign territory. It's a country unto itself in America and in any country it's in, because they are travelers and they have to have territory in all the places that they travel to. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. Well, what the point is that you're a sovereign human being on the face of the earth. You're born with certain natural rights. For example, no one has the right to tell you whether or not you're allowed to protect yourself if your life is threatened, if someone's trying to kill you. How can someone make a law to say that you can't protect yourself? And let me just say this. Let me bring this up before we get to the top of the hour. If, in fact, it's my God-given right to protect myself, okay, and if I think your medical treatment is potentially harmful to me, isn't it my God-given right to be able to refuse that? And if that's so, how can you tell me to do something like that and then say that our contract is still in force? Because you have broken your word to me on our contract called the Constitution. It doesn't.
No, there's still the king of your castle doctrine, which I don't believe in personal sovereignty per se. I think it was set up to fail, like we mentioned, but there's still the king of the castle doctrine. But I was going to say, prosecutors are very evil people. they don't care about natural law. They care about getting people put in prison, or getting a deal for them so they have money from the action, whatever it takes. And those people, and what was it, St. Louis during these riots a couple years ago, they got persecuted for defending their home from the rioters and they didn't even shoot. They just brandished their guns, and they still got prosecuted by these evil people that supposedly Judge Soros placed in place. And accordingly, George Soros is of the Synagogue of Satan, the same people as the ADL and Southern Poverty Law Center. So they put their people in there to destroy the law, and that's part and parcel of why things have gotten so bad.
So the witch hunt for communists back in the day wasn't that guy's psychological machinations. They were everywhere. And one of the most important things on the face of this earth is who controls Hollywood. Let me just say this to you. Let me put this out there before we go to the top of the hour break, ladies and gentlemen. What happens when your enemy gets in control of your pop culture programming mechanism called Hollywood? China has bought up a bunch of that action down in Hollywood, and you're seeing a bunch of movies where men are feminized and all this. It's because the enemy is making men weaker with the social engineering mechanism that's worked all these years. Now they're in it. They got it. They got control of it, and they're programming the American people one movie at a time. My name's Jimmy. It's in the microcosm. Anything you say can and will be used against you. If you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Stick around. It's Aftermath FM.
Live Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific. But what happens when you miss an episode? Aftermath.fm is the official free streaming network of Ground Zero, featuring some of the top voices in paranormal and parapolitical radio and podcasts, such as The Leo Zagami Show, Into the Microcosm with Jimmy Jean, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable, The Kev Baker Show, The Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray Valentine, and much, much more. What are you waiting for? Head on over to Aftermath.fm right now and get complete on-demand access to the Ground Zero archives, as well as the works of a dozen other hosts. Sign up right now and get complete access to our study groups, videos and document archives, and connect with other listeners on our private social media network. Aftermath.fm, home of quality counterculture talk radio. Aftermath.fm.
Don't regret growing old. It's a privilege denied to many. Heart disease is taking our youth from us. Young people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond are dying needlessly. One of the hardest messages I've ever had to deliver is to convince people that something natural like Extendivite should be taken as a preventative measure. I'm sure you heard an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Extendivite is that ounce. Take Extendivite for 1 year and see what your doctor has to say and how much better you feel. Herbs take time to address the problem. It took years of life to have a problem. Give Extendivite 1 year to fix the problem. Don't wait until it's too late. Call 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com or visit us on Amazon.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Extendovite works. I use it. I can vouch for it. I don't know what it'll do for you. I know what it does for me. Appreciate Don and his sponsor in the show. He helps keep us going. And you guys keep us going. Aftermath FM keeps us going. We can find us here exclusively Monday through Friday, 10:30 Pacific, immediately following Clyde Lewis, the number one on the top 50, the hot 50 over on TalkStream Live. I want to say hello to TalkStream Live. I want to say hello to all our YouTubers over here and everybody over in the Discord, Aftermath Discord. We're here with LB Bork.
What do you want from life? To kidnap an heiress or threaten her with a knife? What do you want from life? To get cable TV and watch it every night? There you sit up, lump in your chair. Where do you sleep and what do you wear when you're sleeping? What do you want from life? And in
As the 21st century began, human evolution was at a turning point. Natural selection, the process by which the strongest, the smartest, the fastest reproduced in greater numbers than the rest, a process which had once favored the noblest traits of man, now began to favor different traits. Most science fiction of the day predicted a future that was more civilized and more intelligent. But as time went on, things seemed to be heading in the opposite direction, a dumbing down. How did this happen? Evolution does not necessarily reward intelligence. With no natural predators to thin the herd, it began to simply reward those who reproduced the most.
A Merc Montclair,
To become an
a
endangered
Meteor, an MG, or Mort Moriarty, a Maserati truck, a new Monza, or a moped, a Winnebago. Hell, I've heard of Winnebagos. We're giving them away. A Las Vegas wedding, a gold Kama Sutra coffee pot, or a baby's arm holding an apple.
That's the Tubes. What do you
Yeah.
want? What from life? What do you want from
I
life?
saw them a couple years ago.
Did you really?
Yeah, I love them.
You know, Fee Waybill went
Fee
like
Waybill, what a actor, what a character.
he went full on conservative. Like he is like super political, man. No,
Wow.
yeah, you know he's a trip. Now, I worked up here in the Bay Area doing shows for a long time, and we used to do a bunch of shows with the Tubes. The club that I work for promoted the Tubes big time, so we did a bunch of shows with them, including some stadium shows. And I've told this story before on the air. It's like he used to do this song called. They used to do a song called Sports, and
Right, I know it.
yeah. So they would have like a full on, ladies and gentlemen. They had a full on stage show. They had dancers and they did all kinds of stuff. He came out in costumes. It was like a full on Broadway production. And so he threw out, because they were the Tubes. He threw out tube socks during that show, during that song, Sports. You know, you throw out these different things. And so we were doing a show in Salinas at Sherwood Hall in California with the Tubes. And right before the show, they sent me down. They sent me to the store to go buy tube socks. Because he had tube socks on the rider. So, I mean, every show they do, so you have to, the production people have to produce the tube socks or whatever. So, you know, obviously, if you get tube socks on every show, you can only imagine how many pairs of socks that guy has. You throw them out every night, you know. Anyway, you can be a slave and get your tube socks. You can choose to be a rocker in the situation that we've got set up here. But you're still, if you're in America, you're still a slave. And if you're a rebel by voting, you become a rebel. Then by every 4 years, you reaffirm your slavery by stepping up to vote. Now, is that correct?
Yep. Like we said earlier, the 2 terms of Grant were filled with graft and corruption. That has never ended.
No. It isn't. It's the foundation. It's the cornerstone of America, you might say.
Last 150 years. Well, it's been run by Luciferians since day one. That creepy pyramid with the Masonic eye on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposedly God.
The Eye of Horus.
Horus, the Eye of Horus.
Mm-hmm.
That was put into place the same year the Constitution was installed.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it didn't show up on the dollar bill until the Roosevelt reign, I believe.
Well,
but what's interesting is talking about the conspiracy. The first Jesuit school, which was Georgetown University, was also established the same year the Constitution was put in place.
Yeah, interesting.
But there was only 4 Jesuit schools up until the Civil War. Then they blossomed into over 40.
Well, we have a Jesuit in office, don't we?
No,
Joe Biden.
Biden's a Zionist.
Is he?
He's admitted it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I heard him say that. He also referenced George Wallace the other day, and he used to be a big proponent of George Wallace. I think he even worked on his campaign. So, I don't know. Anyway, it really doesn't matter who's in that office, because
no, they're all puppets. I call them butt puppets.
Mm-hmm. But they really are the commander in chief as far as the corporation is concerned.
Right.
Right.
And the United States has always been a corporation. People pass that around like it's some kind of secret knowledge or special knowledge.
Uh-huh.
It's really not.
No.
It went to a de facto corporation with the 14th Amendment. But the states were are corporations, and they always were. The term citizen, even state citizen prior to the 14th Amendment, relates to a municipal corporation. So the civil law is based under municipal or the citizenship status. So when you hear the term citizen, it relates to municipal corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes all the way back to the Roman Empire.
Well, so now
what they did is basically reinstitute the Roman Empire with the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. So the thing is, Epic Journeyman, I can see you there ready to jump in. Let me just ask this question though. So let me get this straight now. So first of all, I would say 5 out of 10 people think the Constitution gives them their rights, and those same 5 out of 10 people think we live in a democracy. So we're in trouble. We're in trouble because people think they're doing the right thing when they go down and vote.
In the democracy.
Right. So, you know what I've put forward over the last couple of years is that there is no avoiding the future. If you don't want to get out on the dance floor, you don't have to. But the future's coming whether people like it or not.
Right. That's the bad part.
Right. But here's the thing. Your information puts you in a power position on the internet in the sense that the whole reason we have a representative is because we used to have to send one guy all the way up there on his donkey, right up there from the States, and took like months to get up to Washington so he could go up and be the voice of those people over there in that area. And so we used to have to have these guys because we couldn't all obviously ride our donkeys there. Somebody had to stay back and raise the chickens and plant the crops. But we're not living in that world anymore. We don't need these corrupt fools up in there. I mean, the American people with a positive, this is coming no matter what we do. So there's going to be positive ID on the internet. Okay, there's no avoiding that. So, but what I'm saying is that's not necessarily bad, because at the point that we have that we can turn that around and use it against them and say, well, then what the fuck do we need you for up there? Because now that we have a totally secure internet and totally secure ID system, we're running on the blockchain. We can just vote directly. So you could just take a whole segment of the population, just like jury duty, make no bill bigger than 10 pages, and have everybody just vote on it straight away. And you know what? Let's even go even further, LB. I mean, if we're making changes. Let's just do this. How about this? We'll throw a 3% Tobin tax on all transactions on Wall Street. We can do that. There's many things we can do. How about this? You're going to be worth X amount of dollars per year in taxes. How about this? You decide where your tax dollars go. So if there's something that comes up here that people want to vote on, they want it to come in, and it costs money, well, if the taxpayers don't allocate their taxes to that project, it doesn't get funded. Why are we watching the masturbation habits of the tsetse fly on the backs of hyenas eating, carcasses? You know what I mean? We're spending millions of dollars on that, but if everybody had their, you're worth X amount of tax dollars. I mean, they're using you and what you're worth in tax dollars to bet with derivatives. They're pooling all that together and using that number as a way to make money off loans. So why not take your tax dollars and spend them and allocate them to the projects that work? In other words, why am I doing this? Why am I refacing the libraries in my county when I got potholes? In other words, you see what I mean? Electronic anarchy is what I'm talking about, man.
It could go that way, but I've come up with a saying or quote that goes,
go ahead.
As long as men are pawns of evil, technology is evil. So there's a balance there, I guess is what I'm saying.
There is.
I have nothing against technology, but what I said, if people are going to serve evil, they're going to use it against us, and that's what's happened and what is going on.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, in a proper world, things would be right, but people are evil. And if you read Tupper Saucy's book, Rulers of Evil, government, and I remember, or you said something, was it before the show or after, that the kings used to rule based on being just?
Yeah, righteousness and
righteousness, right. So they've replaced that system. Rush did an album on it, which that's when I stopped listening to them because something was wrong with them in my estimation. But they did the album Farewell to Kings, and that's exactly what they were talking about, the transition from the sovereign king system to the state system, the rebirth of the Roman Empire is what that album dealt with, basically.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, you had to pull the sword out of the stone.
Yeah.
And that took a special somebody. Not everybody could pull the sword out of the stone, and that's what made a king. Not how much money he had in the bank or who his grandpappy was. So, there's only one king, the King of Kings.
Right.
And so
I agree.
Yeah.
And if people just live by what he taught and do unto others as you would have done unto you, that's
exactly
really the only law we need.
That is the only thing that is exactly in every single religious practice and devotion across the world. That one single thing has in common. So if you could find the one common thing that we could all go by that would make things more peaceful, that's it. The thing is, I'm a big proponent of no masters, no slaves, man.
Right.
I
agree.
I think that the future potentially could have one. It could be one of, like I'm saying, anarchy, electronic anarchy. I'm not talking about spray painting with black spray paint and breaking windows out with your skateboard.
I'm against anarchy in that respect.
Yeah,
I think it's my thing is they call it Republican freedom. Justice Black in 1967, he said something to the effect that Republican freedom is what people are missing based on their ignorance. I'm short stating what he quoted, but well, why anarchy when you have Republican freedom? It's there. It's there for people to take.
Well, because they've
been brainwashed and lied to.
We have to have some way to govern without rulers. There has to be some method. And so I put this forward on the show, and I'll ask you too right now about. I've said this before. Humanity has never known a system where the people have been free, including America. So people could not operate if there wasn't somebody telling them what to do. In other words, when they freed a lot of those slaves, they stood around and looked at each other and go, "What are we going to do now?"
They wanted to stay on the plantations.
Exactly.
I understand.
Exactly, because they looked around. They said, "What am I going to do now? Where am I going to live? What am I going to eat?" You know.
Right, and I've said recently that people are basically under some kind of what's a syndrome? I always space
I know it. I know what you're talking about.
The syndrome.
When you love your captors.
Yeah, you love your captors, and that's what most people are under right now.
Stockholm syndrome.
Thank you. Thank you. There he is.
I know. Where the hell you been, man? He's been snorkeling in the chat room over there. I seen him over there with a snorkel out.
But anyway, back to Rulers of Evil and Tupper Saucy. The purpose of government is to rule evil people. And Republican freedom, like Justice Black said, he basically backed that up, that people are evil because they're willfully ignorant. And he even made mention that trying to monopolize markets is evil. So this governmental system is based on ruling evil.
The whole thing's evil.
The whole thing's evil. So
there's people are chained to this existence of perpetuating this wheel, from point A to point B, from the time you're born till the time you die. Your whole sole purpose is to go to your slave job, create Federal Reserve notes that you can take down to the store and trade in for consumable goods that you can throw away.
Right.
You could throw it away. I mean, there's a big pile of it over there, and there's storage units filled with it. There's people got so much shit they can't even keep it in their house. They have to get a storage unit to keep it. And think about a storage unit in a year. How much you pay for a storage unit, and if it's a couple grand, how much shit is in there is worth a couple grand. You know what I'm saying? I mean, by the time you paid storage units for like 3 years, you could have bought totally new shit. So I'm just saying, it's just one giant company store.
Now that you bring that up, PAC, People's Awareness Coalition, that I founded in 1998 was based on a paper I had sent out. Well, it was an email I sent out to, I don't know, at least 1,000 human resource departments, questioning the origin of that terminology. That's what founded People's Awareness Coalition, human resource. I thought, when I used to go to my dad's business when I was young in the 60s, he'd take me in on Saturday. Everything was shut down. And, I remember seeing personnel department. It was an old building. Actually, it was used in the movie with Sylvester Stallone called FIST. It was the Federal Interstate State Truckers or something like that was the acronym. But anyway, personnel department was on this glass, the old-timey glass window, they had it painted up there. And I never really worked for anyone. I was never in the corporate system at all. I started my own business when I was age 19. So the first time I'd seen human resource department was when I went into my ex-wife's business. She worked for Citibank in the processing department or area of Citibank. And I went in there and I saw human resource on the door, and I go, what the hell is that? I go, you're letting them call you human resources? That's a freaking slave title. And that was late 80s, okay? And I just kind of shelved it, or couched it. I didn't worry about it until they got that idiot Clinton running for office. Dude, and I go, something's wrong here.
Isn't it like we're so
that's
much...
when I got involved in research and all this stuff.
Isn't it?
But honest to God, that was my first paper I had written, or first thing I addressed, the human resource thing.
And the human capital, and we're just like cattle, man.
Right.
when the farmer has to give his cattle some antibiotics, man, they just creep up on it and jam the hypodermic into its neck, and then move on to the next cow. And that's pretty much where we're at. Obviously
they actually refer to people as animals in the U.S. Code, and that stems back to the Justinian Code from the year 300, 400, somewhere in there. Can't remember the exact year, but if you go into the Jesuit schools, it's on their websites that comes from.
You think about the food that we get fed here on the plantation, and just like the food they feed the cattle, they feed us a bunch of food that fattens us up and gives us genetically modified organisms that causes inflammation. So people are in agonizing fucking pain. Nobody can sleep. They're getting blasted by 5 gigahertz internet at their house all night long, with the beam forming, going right to their device, their phone, which is on the table next to their head. The skulls of children don't form until they're 7 years old. Your children sitting in those rooms with those devices, it's no good, man. No good. My name's Jimmy. It's in the microcosm. We're going to open up the phone, 626-999-4761. Give us a call about your rights. Give us a call about what you think. You want questions? We got answers, because LB Bork's here. PackinLaw.us. PackinLaw.us. Go on over there. PACINLAW.us. Head on over there. There's more than just the Red Amendment. There's lots and lots of articles and contributions. And have you ever heard of a dude who wrote a book called Sovereign to Serf? Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Well, I don't want to... Yeah, we don't have to get into it. I'm just curious. Because there's some
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
He's wrong on
I'm sure
he's
he is.
stolen my work.
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand. Why the people that have know my work have not moved back forward. They're letting these operatives and opportunists take over with their half-baked, half-truth information. And they I have written papers.
And they grift. They grift people.
They grift, yeah. And the thing is, there's about a 3 or 4 year cycle that I've seen the movement move in, where these grifters come and they go. I know one family that was ripped off from some guy in Colorado. Well, he was in Colorado. They were in Texas. The family got ripped off $10,000. Well, he's gone. And the guy that had him on his radio show won't have me on because I chewed him out for having different people on. Even some of his listeners said, I thought LB had all this pegged down, and handled. yet you have these other people on, and they're contradicting some things that he said. What are you doing? So I chewed this guy out, and he won't have me on this show. I haven't talked to him in
it's like
8 years, I don't think.
You're like Jordan Maxwell, man. I mean, you've been around just as long, okay? I mean, your work is just like Jordan Maxwell. Jordan Maxwell got ripped off, man, beyond even recognition. The guy, all the work that he's put in, all the years, all the time, all the effort, all the energy he spent, all the people that are awake because of what he said and all the things he said, he's sitting there broke, man. He's got dick. He didn't get anything for it. And, you know, on some level, that's not cool. At all. So
it's not, but these people, like we said, the government's there to rule evil people, and that's just part of it. And I can pull that quote up by Justice Black.
Okay, do that because we're about to go to the break. Listen, if you're listening on replay this morning, you can tune in and find the rest of this 30 minutes that's going to be going on of the show where you find podcast, Apple, iTunes, Spreaker, wherever it is. Come on over, become a supporter, Aftermath FM. My name's Jimmy. This is Brap Allgood.
The age of the world's great civilizations has been around 200 years. These nations have progressed through this sequence from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from great courage to liberty, and from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to complacency, from complacency to apathy, and from apathy back to dependence, and from dependence back to bondage, back to bondage, back to bondage. Logic alone would tell you the republic is being destroyed. The republic is being destroyed by European secret societies operating under Rome, and nobody seems to know anything about it. Criminals are always organized, that's why they're always superior. Good people never get organized. Only criminals get organized. They operate in the dark, totally ruthless. High crimes and treason against the American Republic. The mad rush for control and ownership of the human race. The human race is lawfully and legally set up to be owned. Our bodies are actually owned on the stock market. Human resource. Just like tin and iron and rubber and oil. It's a resource. Go to Google and just type in commerce game. It's all right there. Nothing works the way you think it does. All over the world, the bankers are still robbing the people, ripping them off, putting it in the bank. The more we change, the more...
Favorite president, and I'm standing in front of the Oval Office at the White House, which is always an exciting place to be. I got back a day ago from Walter Reed Medical Center. I spent 4 days there. I think this was a blessing from God that I caught it. It was a blessing in disguise. I caught it. I heard about this drug. I said, let me take it. It was my suggestion. I said, let me take it. And it was incredible the way